the silent dreams.
There are those who believe the world can be measured, that every distance can be calculated, every boundary precisely marked, every line drawn with mathematical certainty, that the earth itself is nothing more than a problem to be solved through careful observation, proper instruments, and rigorous application of geometric principles. Surveyors are trained to this belief. They learn to trust theodolites and chains, levels and transits. They reduce landscape to numbers, translate three-dimensional reality into two-dimensional maps, make the complex simple through the elegant language of measurement. And most of the time, this works. Most land submits to being measured. Most boundaries can be established with precision. Most property lines can be drawn on paper and recognized on the ground, unambiguous and clear. But some places resist measurement. Not through physical impossibility, the instruments work, the calculations balance, the numbers make sense, but through something more subtle. The measurements refuse to remain stable. Lines drawn one day appear shifted the next. Boundaries that should be fixed prove strangely fluid, as if the land itself objects to being reduced to geometry. Edmund Hartwell is a surveyor, 35 years old, trained at the Royal Institution, employed by a London firm specializing in estate mapping and boundary verification. He is good at his work, methodical, precise, with a reputation for accuracy that has earned him commissions from some of the wealthiest landowners in England. He believes in measurement the way other men believe in God. To him, the theodolite is a tool of truth, the chain an instrument of certainty. What can be measured is real. What cannot be measured does not matter. Tonight he travels to Blackwood Estate in Derbyshire. He has been commissioned by the owner, Mr. Thomas Ashcroft, to create detailed boundary maps. The property has changed hands several times recently, and there is some confusion about the exact extent of the eastern lands, where forest was cleared and is now regrowing. It should be straightforward work. 6 days, perhaps 7, walk the boundaries with chain and compass, set up the theodolite at key vantage points, take measurements, record angles, calculate distances, reduce it all to numbers, then transfer those numbers to clean lines on paper. Simple, rational, proven. He does not know, as his train carries him north through the summer countryside, that some boundaries existed before geometry, that some lines were drawn according to principles his instruments cannot detect, that some measurements matter more than any distance calculated in feet and chains. The land is waiting for him, not hostile but curious. How will this man of science respond when his instruments tell him impossible things, when his measurements refuse to stabilize, when the boundaries he tries to draw keep shifting, like water, like memory, like the patient movement of earth that does not recognize human divisions? The train moves through the night. In his compartment, Edmund reviews his maps and notes, checking his equipment one final time, everything in order, everything prepared, everything ready for the work ahead. He does not see, through the train window, the landscape preparing itself, the way the old forest leans, the way the spring sends ripples across its surface, the way the boundary stones, placed centuries ago according to older measurements, begin to hum with a frequency no instrument can detect. The estate is deciding what to teach him, how to show him that some things cannot be reduced to numbers, that some boundaries are written in substance deeper than any map. Rest now, let the story carry you. Let the measurements dissolve. Let sleep come gentle, like the patient earth refusing to be pinned down, like distances that shift when no one watches, like the slow understanding that precision is not always truth. The story begins. I arrive at Blackwood Estate on a Monday morning in July, when the summer heat makes distances shimmer. The journey from London is long, train to Derby, local line to the village, then hired carriage up the Valley Road. I use the time productively, reviewing the commission documents Mr. Ashcroft sent, brief history of the property, previous survey notes from 1823, outdated and incomplete, specific concerns about the eastern boundary where recent clearing has created confusion about the property line. My name is Edmund Hartwell. I am 35 years old, a professional surveyor trained at the Royal Institution and employed by Pemberton and Associates, a respected London firm specializing in estate mapping. I have surveyed properties from Cornwall to Northumberland. I know my trade thoroughly. The carriage climbs steadily through rolling countryside. The land here is beautiful but unremarkable: green hills, stone walls, sheep grazing on slopes. My surveyor's eye automatically notes topography, estimates elevations, identifies potential sightlines for theodolite placement. And then the estate appears. Blackwood House rises on higher ground, Georgian brick, symmetrical, well-proportioned. The grounds are extensive, perhaps 200 acres visible from the approach. Formal gardens near the house, then parkland sloping toward the river valley, and to the east, an area of mixed clearance and regrowth where stumps stand among young saplings. That eastern section will be my primary concern. Where exactly does the boundary lie? The 1823 survey shows it running along the edge of wild wood that no longer exists in its original form. I will need to locate the old boundary markers, likely stone or iron posts, and re-establish the line using modern precision. The carriage stops before the main entrance. A housekeeper emerges, elderly woman, severe expression, the type who runs great houses with iron discipline. "Mr. Hartwell," she says, not a question. "I am Mrs. Crawford. Mr. Ashcroft is expecting you. Please come inside." I follow her into an entrance hall of black and white marble, impressive in its classical proportions. A man descends the staircase as we enter, grey-haired, perhaps 50, dressed in comfortable country clothes rather than London formality. "Mr. Hartwell," he says, extending his hand warmly. "Thomas Ashcroft, thank you for coming. I hope the journey was not too arduous." "Not at all, Mr. Ashcroft. I am eager to begin work." "Excellent. Let me show you to your room, and then we can discuss the particulars of the commission." My room is comfortable. Second floor, east wing, view over the grounds toward the area I will be surveying. I unpack methodically, work clothes, boots, notebooks, reference books. My surveying equipment travels separately in reinforced cases and will be delivered to a ground floor storage room where I can maintain and check it. I stand at the window, studying the eastern lands. From this vantage point, I can see the cleared area, perhaps 20 acres of stumps and regrowth. Beyond that, darker forest that was presumably spared from clearing. The boundary must run somewhere through that transitional zone. I pull out my notebook and begin sketching a preliminary map based on visual observation. Estimate distances, note landmarks that might serve as reference points, identify where I will need to set up the theodolite for optimal triangulation. This is familiar work, satisfying work, reducing uncertainty to precision. A knock interrupts my sketching. "Come in." A young woman enters, dark hair, intelligent eyes, perhaps 25. She carries herself with quiet confidence that suggests education and capability. "Mr. Hartwell, I am Catherine Ashford, Mr. Ashcroft's companion and research assistant. He asked me to introduce myself and offer my help with your work. I know the estate well and can guide you to significant locations." "Miss Ashford, a pleasure. I appreciate the offer, though surveying is primarily solitary work, just myself and my instruments." "Of course, but the eastern lands can be difficult to navigate. There are complications that may not be immediately apparent from maps." "What sort of complications?" She hesitates, choosing words carefully. "The ground there is uneven. Old forest undergrowth makes walking treacherous, and the boundary markers are very old. Some date from when the estate was first established in 1687. They may not be where the 1823 survey indicated." "I see. Well, locating and verifying historical markers is precisely what I am here to do. I assure you, I have dealt with far worse terrain than overgrown forest. I am sure you have. Something in her tone suggests skepticism, but her expression remains polite. Dinner is at 7. Mr. Ashcroft will explain the commission in more detail then. She withdraws, leaving me with the odd impression that she was trying to warn me about something, but could not say it directly. I return to my sketch. The eastern boundary, based on visual observation, should run roughly northeast to southwest through the cleared area. Tomorrow, I will walk it with compass and chain, locate the markers, take preliminary measurements. It should be straightforward. I begin work at dawn, when the light is clear and the air cool. My equipment is in perfect order: theodolite, surveyor's chain, 66 feet of linked iron, calibrated precisely, compass, ranging poles, stakes and flags for marking points. I have notebooks for recording measurements, India ink pens that will not fade, a wooden case for protecting my work from weather. Mr. Thorne, the groundskeeper, meets me at the stable yard. He is perhaps 70, weathered but strong, moving with the ease of someone who has worked this land for decades. "You are the surveyor," he says, studying my equipment, "come to measure the boundaries." "Yes, Mr. Ashcroft indicated you could show me the start of the eastern boundary." "I can show you where it should be. Whether it stays there is another matter." An odd comment, but groundskeepers often develop peculiar attachments to properties. I do not pursue it. He leads me across the formal gardens toward the eastern lands. As we walk, he points out features: the walled garden to our right, the stables behind us, the old oak marking the edge of the cultivated grounds. The boundary, he says, traditionally ran along the eastern edge of what we called the Wild Wood. But 2 years ago, much of that forest was cleared. The markers should still be there, stone posts set by the first Blackwood in 1687. "And you remember their locations?" "I know where they were. Whether they have stayed put is what you will discover." Again that strange phrasing: markers do not move. They are fixed points, deliberately set in the ground precisely because they do not shift. We reach the cleared area. The morning sun casts long shadows across the stumps and new growth. It is beautiful in its way, the play of light, the green of young saplings, the sense of land healing itself. "The first marker," Thorne says, "should be approximately 200 yards in that direction." He points northeast, toward where forest transitions to clearing. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne. I can proceed from here." He nods and departs, leaving me alone with my instruments and the morning. I set up my ranging poles at the estimated location of the first marker, then walk the indicated direction, using my compass to maintain bearing. The ground is uneven, roots, undergrowth, a few remaining fallen logs from the clearing, but nothing my boots cannot handle. At approximately 200 yards, I find it. A stone post, perhaps 4 feet tall, half buried in earth and overgrown with moss. It is old, the stone weathered smooth, the top slightly rounded by centuries of rain, but it is clearly man-made, deliberately placed, and exactly where it should be according to the 1823 survey notes. Excellent, I clear the moss away, revealing carved markings, EB 1687, and what appears to be a property symbol. I plant a stake beside the marker, tie a red flag to it, and record the location in my notebook. Marker 1. Stone post, 4 ft height, carved EB 1687, located 203 yards, bearing 67 degrees from ranging pole position. Now for the precision work. I return to my ranging pole and set up the theodolite, a beautiful instrument, brass and glass, capable of measuring angles to within seconds of arc. I level it carefully, align it with magnetic north, then sight on the marker I just flagged. The angle is 66 degrees 58. 32. I record this. Next, I need to establish the distance with absolute precision. I unfold my surveyor's chain and begin measuring one link at a time, keeping the chain level, compensating for slope, moving methodically across the uneven ground. 66 feet, another 66, another. At 198 feet, I reach the marker. I record distance from ranging pole to marker 1, 198 feet. This differs slightly from my compass-based estimate of 203 yards, 609 feet, but that is expected. Packing is approximate, chaining is exact. I continue this process for the next 2 hours, locating and measuring to 3 more markers. Each is where the historical documents suggest it should be. Each measurement is precise and consistent. By mid-morning, I have established 4 points along the eastern boundary. I can already begin to see the line emerging, a gentle curve running northeast through the cleared land, following the natural contour where forest once stood. This is going well, faster than expected even. I decide to continue to the 5th marker, which according to my notes should be near a spring or water feature mentioned in the 1823 survey. I walk northeast, following the projected line, my compass guiding me. And that is when I find it. A circular structure of old brick, rising from the ground amid ferns and wildflowers. Inside, water clear and still, bubbling up from deep earth. This must be the spring referenced in the historical documents. An excellent landmark for surveying, permanent, unmistakable, perfect for tying measurements to. I approach to examine it more closely. The brickwork is very old, the same period as the boundary markers. And on the northern side, I can see another boundary stone, this one carved with symbols I do not recognize, spirals, radiating lines, geometric patterns that seem almost ritualistic. I clear the moss to read the inscription, "The water remembers, 1687. Curious phrasing, but 17th century people had peculiar ways of marking property. This is likely just decorative text, perhaps a reference to the spring's permanence. I set up my theodolite at the spring, using the boundary stone as a reference point. I will measure back to my previous markers, establish this location precisely, then continue the line forward from here. I cite on marker 4, the last point I established. The angle is wrong. According to my calculations, the angle from the spring to marker 4 should be approximately 245 degrees, but the theodolite reads 251 degrees. I check my level, perfect. I check my magnetic north alignment, correct. I recite, still 251 degrees. 6 degrees of error is impossible. My instrument is calibrated to seconds of arc. I could not be off by 6 full degrees unless something is fundamentally wrong with my setup. I break down the theodolite and set it up again from scratch, level it, align it, sight on marker 4. 251 degrees. I walk back to marker 4, verify the flag is still in place. It is. I return to the spring, set up again, sight again. 252 degrees. The angle has changed. In the 15 minutes I was gone, the angle changed by 1 degree. This is impossible. Angles do not change. Fixed points remain fixed. Geometry does not shift based on time of day or observer position. I must be making an error somewhere. My compass must be affected by local magnetic variation, iron ore deposits in the ground, perhaps, creating unusual magnetic fields. I will remeasure everything using the chain, not the theodolite. Pure distance, no angles, that will establish the truth. I spend the rest of the day remeasuring, and the measurements refuse to stabilize. The distance from marker 1 to marker 2, which I measured at 312 feet in the morning, now measures 318 feet. The distance from marker 2 to marker 3, previously 287 feet, now reads 283 feet. The distances are changing, shifting, as if the markers themselves are moving, though I know they are not. They are stone posts set in earth, immovable by anything less than deliberate excavation. By evening, I am exhausted and profoundly unsettled. I return to the house with my notebooks full of inconsistent measurements, my confidence in my instruments badly shaken. At dinner, Mr. Ashcroft asks how the work is progressing. Slowly, I admit, I am encountering some irregularities in the measurements, likely due to local magnetic variation affecting my compass readings. I will need to compensate for this. Catherine Ashford, seated across from me, speaks quietly. Mr. Hartwell, may I ask, did you take measurements near the spring? Yes, why? The spring is a difficult place to measure. Many have tried. The boundary there has never been successfully mapped. Miss Ashford, with respect, any location can be mapped if proper surveying technique is applied. Perhaps, she says, but some boundaries exist according to principles that geometry does not recognize. Some lines are drawn by agreement rather than measurement, by care rather than calculation. This is nonsense, of course. Boundaries are either precisely defined or they are not. There is no middle ground, no ambiguity. My work tomorrow will prove this. But that night, lying in bed, I find myself troubled by the shifting measurements. 6 degrees of angle change, 6 feet of distance variation. Small numbers, perhaps, but in surveying, precision is everything. 6 feet of error can mean the difference between legal boundary and trespass. I resolve to start fresh tomorrow. New measurements, new approach. I will reduce this land to numbers, whether it wishes to be reduced or not. The second day is worse. I begin at dawn again, this time focusing entirely on the spring and the markers immediately around it. I will establish this one point with absolute precision, use it as a foundation, build outward from certainty. I set up my theodolite on ground I know to be level and stable. I sight on the brick structure surrounding the spring, using its exact center as my reference point. I record the position, the angles to surrounding markers, the distances chained with meticulous care. And then, 1 hour later, I measure again. Everything has shifted. Not dramatically, but unmistakably. The angle to marker 5 has changed by 3 degrees. The distance to marker 3 has increased by 4 feet. I am not making errors. I am trained to avoid errors. My instruments are calibrated. My technique is sound. The land itself is refusing to be measured. I sit on the ground beside my theodolite, staring at my notebooks. Pages of measurements, all inconsistent, numbers that should tell a clear story, but instead create chaos. You are beginning to understand. I turn. William Thorne has appeared, moving silently through the undergrowth. Mr. Thorne, I did not hear you approach. The land is quiet here, makes it easy to move without sound. He looks at my theodolite, my notebooks, my growing frustration. You are finding that the measurements will not hold. The measurements are inconsistent. I am trying to determine why. I can tell you why, if you are willing to listen. I should dismiss him, should return to my work, trust my training, persist until I force the land to yield to geometry. But I am tired and confused and beginning to doubt my own competence. Tell me, I say. He sits on a nearby stump, his weathered face thoughtful. This land has boundaries that were established before surveying existed, before chains and theodolites and geometric calculations. The first people who lived in this valley recognized that the spring was sacred ground, that the forest around it was separate from cultivated land. They marked that separation not with precise measurements, but with understanding, with care, with agreements about what should be tended and what should be left wild. Mr. Thorne, with respect, That is not how property law works. Boundaries must be precisely defined or disputes arise. And yet for 200 years, there were no disputes, because everyone understood where the boundary was, even though no one had measured it exactly. The spring was the center. The forest around it was wild. The cultivated lands ended where care ended. It was that simple. Until the forest was cleared. Yes, until Mr. Hartwell, no relation to you, different family, decided to measure the land for profit rather than understand it for what it was. He cleared the wild wood, exposed the spring, tried to pipe the water to the house, and the land responded, showed him that some things resist being reduced to use, to measurement, to ownership. I should walk away from this conversation. This is superstition, folklore, the kind of thinking that my profession was invented to replace with rational precision. But the measurements in my notebook tell a story I cannot ignore. Are you suggesting the land is somehow conscious, that it deliberately resists being surveyed? I am suggesting that some things cannot be measured because they were never meant to be. The boundary here is not a line, it is a relationship between what is tended with care and what is left to tend itself, between human order and natural wildness. You cannot chain that, you cannot sight it through a theodolite, you can only respect it. He stands. I will leave you to your work, Mr. Hartwell, but consider this. Perhaps the question is not where exactly the boundary lies, but whether a boundary of that kind should exist at all. Whether some things should remain unmeasured because measuring them destroys what makes them significant. He walks away, leaving me alone with my impossible notebooks. I spend the afternoon trying different approaches. I use only the chain, eliminating angles entirely, pure distance, the most basic measurement. The distances still shift. I set up permanent stakes at established points, measure from stake to stake, eliminating all variables. The stakes are where I left them, but the distances between them change depending on when I measure. Finally, in frustration, I measure the same distance 10 times in a row, recording each measurement immediately. The 10 measurements: 316 feet, 314 feet, 319 feet, 312 feet, 320 feet, 311 feet, 318 feet, 313 feet, 321 feet, 310 feet, an 11-foot range of variation on the same distance, measured 10 times within 30 minutes. This violates every principle of surveying. It is impossible, and yet the numbers are in my notebook, recorded in my own hand, undeniable. I pack up my equipment and return to the house. That evening, I ask Mr. Ashcroft if I might examine any previous survey documents he possesses. He takes me to the library, pulls out several leather portfolios. The 1823 survey you have seen, there is also this, and 1776 attempt never completed, and this, a 1701 survey by the second Richard Blackwood, the founder's son. I examine the documents. The 1776 survey contains a note in the margin: the eastern boundary resists measurement. Recommend maintaining traditional understanding rather than imposed precision. The 1701 survey is even more direct. Attempted to chain the boundary from oak to spring. Distance varied with each measurement. Concluded the boundary is established by covenant rather than geometry. No further measurement attempted. 300 years of failed surveys. 3 centuries of surveyors concluding that this boundary cannot be precisely measured. And now I am the latest in that long line of failure. Mr. Ashcroft, I say carefully, why did you commission this survey if you knew the boundary has historically resisted measurement? Because I hoped modern instruments might succeed where historical ones failed. Because I value precision and wanted to establish the boundary definitively. And because, he pauses, because I wanted you to experience what others have experienced, to understand that this land operates according to principles that transcend our categories and methods. You knew I would fail. I knew you would encounter something that challenged your assumptions. What you do with that challenge is up to you. I should be angry, should feel manipulated, but instead I feel something else, curiosity. The same curiosity that drew me to surveying in the first place, the desire to understand, to make sense of the world through careful observation. What would you have me do then? If the boundary cannot be measured, how do I fulfill the commission? Map what can be mapped, and for what cannot, document the resistance itself. Tell the truth about what you find, that some boundaries exist in the relationship between people and land, not in geometric precision. That might be the most valuable survey Blackwood has ever received. The next morning, I returned to the spring, not with my theodolite or chain, but with just my notebook and pen. If I cannot measure this boundary, perhaps I can at least observe it, describe it, document what makes it different from conventional property lines. I sit on the brick rim of the spring and look around. The cleared land to the west, with its stumps and regrowth, the forest to the east, dense and old, and between them, this circular structure of brick, this water rising from deep earth, this place that refuses to be reduced to geometry. Catherine Ashford appears carrying a basket. Mr. Hartwell, I thought you might appreciate lunch. Surveying is hungry work. Thank you, Miss Ashford, though I am not surveying today, I am observing. She sits on the grass nearby, unpacks bread and cheese. You have realized that the measurements will not hold. Yes, though I do not understand why. Touch the water, she says, it will show you. Show me what? What it remembers, why this boundary exists, why it cannot be reduced to chains and angles. This is absurd. Water cannot show anything except reflection. But I have come this far, encountered enough impossibility, that I am willing to try one more impossible thing. I kneel beside the spring and dip my hand in the water. It is shockingly cold, and then visions flood through me, not quite memory, not quite dream, something else, older. I see the spring as it has been for thousands of years, rising constant from deep earth, before there were people in this valley, before there was England. Before there were names for this place. I see the first humans who found it. They recognize it as sacred immediately, not because they are superstitious, but because they can feel what I have been too trained to feel, that this water comes from somewhere profound, that it connects to depths, both geological and spiritual, that it marks a place where different realities touch. They build the brick structure to mark it, not to contain it or control it, but to acknowledge it, to say, we see you, we respect you, we will not disturb what you are. Centuries pass, the vision shifts. I see Richard Blackwood in 1687, standing where I stand now. He has purchased this land, has plans to build his estate, but the local people tell him, leave the spring alone, leave the forest around it wild, do not measure this ground, do not try to own it in the conventional sense. Tend the lands around it, but leave this center untouched. He agrees, not because he believes in spirits or magic, but because he is practical. He needs the local people's cooperation. And more than that, standing here, feeling the water, he understands that some things are diminished by being possessed completely, that preservation sometimes means accepting mystery. The vision shifts again. I see his son in 1701, attempting exactly what I am attempting now, trying to measure the boundary, to establish it precisely. His chain gives different measurements each time. His compass spins. His surveyors abandon the work, frightened by instruments that betray them. But the son is wiser than his surveyors. He sits beside the spring, as I sit now, and he asks, why do you resist? And the spring answers, not in words, but in understanding. because measurement implies possession, because precise boundaries suggest the land is a thing to be divided, parceled, owned in discrete portions, because some relationships cannot survive being made too explicit. The boundary cannot be measured because the boundary is not a line. It is a buffer, a transition, a zone where human order gradually cedes to natural wildness. You cannot draw a single line through such a space. You can only recognize where one state begins to yield to another. The vision fades. I am kneeling beside the spring again, my hand in the cold water, Catherine watching me with patient eyes. "You saw," she says softly. "I saw something, memory, vision, I don't know what to call it. Call it instruction. The water teaches those who are willing to learn. It has been doing so for centuries. Some listen, others refuse. What will you do?" I pull my hand from the water and stand. My surveyor's training wars with what I have just experienced. Everything I know about property law says boundaries must be precise, but everything I have experienced here says precision is not always possible, not always desirable. "I will finish the survey," I say slowly, "but not in the way I was trained. I will map what can be mapped precisely, the western boundary, the northern boundary, the southern. And for the eastern boundary near the spring, I will do something different." "What?" "I will document the zone of transition, mark where cultivated land clearly ends and where wild forest clearly begins, and acknowledge that between those 2 points there is a space that resists precise definition, that perhaps should resist definition." Catherine smiles. "That is wisdom, Mr. Hartwell. The spring will approve." I spend the next 3 days completing my survey. The western, northern, and southern boundaries are straightforward. My instruments work perfectly. The measurements are consistent. I establish precise lines, mark them with stakes, record them with all the accuracy my training demands. But for the eastern boundary, I do something unprecedented in my career. I measure and mark the clear endpoints, where the formal gardens definitively end to the west, where the deep forest definitively begins to the east. These are certain, unambiguous. Between them, I map the transition zone. I note the stumps from the clearing, the young forest regrowing, the spring at the center, the old boundary markers, which I record not as defining a line, but as historical artifacts that testify to past attempts at precision. And in my final report, I write something I have never written before. The eastern boundary of Blackwood Estate cannot be established with geometric precision. Historical attempts over 3 centuries have failed to produce stable measurements. This appears to be due to the nature of the boundary itself. It marks not a line, but a relationship between cultivated and wild land, a transitional zone that resists reduction to simple geometry. I recommend the boundary be defined functionally rather than geometrically. The eastern limit of Blackwood Estate is where deliberate human tending ends. This varies with cultivation, but can be recognized by any person with eyes to see the difference between garden and forest. For legal purposes, I propose the boundary be marked by a protected zone extending 50 feet in all directions from the spring structure. Within this zone, neither cultivation nor construction should occur. Beyond this zone to the east is wild land. West of this zone, toward the house, is cultivated estate. This functional definition serves the same purpose as a geometric line while respecting the nature of the ground itself. It is the strangest survey report I have ever written, but it is also, I believe, the most truthful. The evening before I depart, Mr. Ashcroft hosts a small dinner. Catherine is there, and William Thorne, and a young woman named Elena Hartwell, an artist who has apparently painted the estate and whose work hangs in the library. After dinner, Ashcroft shows me Elena's paintings. One in particular arrests me. It shows the spring, but layered with time. I can see the spring as it is now, and simultaneously as it was centuries ago, and as it has been at every moment between. past and present occupying the same canvas. You have done with measurements what Alina did with paint, Ashcroft says quietly, found a way to document truth that conventional methods miss. Your functional boundary is not a failure of precision. It is a more accurate representation of reality than any geometric line could be. I study the painting longer. In surveying school, they teach us that if something cannot be measured precisely, it is not real, or at least not relevant for legal purposes. But this place has taught me that some things are profoundly real, even though they resist measurement. The question is how to document that reality in ways that law can recognize. And you have answered that question. Your functional boundary can be understood by courts, can be defended in law, but it does not pretend to geometric certainty where no certainty exists. That is brilliant, Mr. Hartwell. I am not certain it is brilliant, but I am certain it is honest, and perhaps in surveying, as in everything else, honesty matters more than precision. On my final morning, William Thorne finds me packing my equipment. "You are leaving with more than you brought," he observes. "What do you mean?" "You arrived trusting instruments above all. You leave understanding that instruments have limits. That is wisdom." I consider this. I still trust instruments, Mr. Thorne, but I have learned they are tools for understanding reality, not substitutes for understanding. I measured what could be measured. For what could not be measured, I observed and described instead. Both have value. That is a good lesson, one many surveyors never learn. He hands me something, a small stone worn smooth. From the spring's edge, a reminder. I take it, turn it in my hand. It is just a stone, water-smoothed, unremarkable, but it carries weight beyond its physical mass. "Thank you, I will keep it." And when you encounter other places that resist measurement, you will remember, some boundaries exist in relationship rather than geometry. Some distances cannot be chained because they were never meant to be reduced to numbers. I pack the stone carefully with my instruments, a reminder that precision has its place, but so does mystery, that some questions are better left open than answered falsely. The train carries me south toward London, toward my office, toward future commissions where I will measure and map dozens of properties with geometric certainty. But I will carry Blackwood with me, the measurements that would not hold, the boundary that resisted being drawn, the understanding that land is more than geometry, that relationships matter as much as distances, that some truths cannot be expressed in numbers. I will be a different surveyor now, still precise where precision is possible, still rigorous in my measurements and calculations, but willing to acknowledge when precision fails, when measurement misses the point. When the map must defer to the territory it claims to represent. My instruments are packed in their cases. My theodolite, my chain, my compass, all the tools of my trade, all still reliable, all still essential. But beside them, wrapped in cloth, is that small stone from the spring's edge, a tool of different kind, a reminder that what matters most often cannot be measured, only felt, respected, protected. The train moves through the countryside. In my notebook, I begin writing my formal report, the measurements that worked, the boundary that didn't, the functional definition that might serve better than geometric precision. It is not the survey I intended to deliver, but it is, I believe, the survey Blackwood needed, the survey that tells truth rather than creating false certainty. And perhaps that is what surveying should be at its best. Not the imposition of geometry on reluctant ground, but the careful observation of what is actually there, documented with honesty whether or not it fits our categories. The measurements remain important, but the unmeasurable matters too. Both can be true, both are necessary. I write and the train carries me home. 6 months later, I receive a letter from Mr. Ashcroft. "Dear Mr. Hartwell, **, your survey has been accepted by the county register and is now the official boundary documentation for Blackwood Estate. More significantly, your functional boundary definition, the protected zone around the spring where the line exists in transition rather than precision, has attracted attention from other scholars and surveyors. I have been contacted by 3 different estates facing similar challenges: boundaries that resist conventional measurement, property lines that seem to shift, places where geometric precision fails. They are asking for surveys using your methodology, functional definitions based on observable relationships rather than abstract calculations. You may have created a new approach to an old problem, not replacing geometric surveying, but supplementing it, recognizing that some boundaries are better defined by what they protect than by where exactly they fall. The spring continues to rise, the forest continues to regrow, and your protected zone ensures both will remain undisturbed. If you ever wish to visit again, you would be most welcome. With gratitude and respect, Thomas Ashgrove. I set the letter down and look at my office, walls covered with maps, shelves full of survey reports, instruments in their cases waiting for the next commission. And on my desk, beside my compass and notebook, sits that small stone from the spring's edge, worn smooth by water that has been rising for thousands of years, carrying memory I can never measure but can finally respect. I pick it up, feel its weight, remember the measurements that wouldn't hold, the boundary that taught me humility. Tomorrow I begin a new commission, an estate in Somerset, boundary dispute, client demanding precision. I will provide precision where precision is possible, but I will also watch for signs that the land resists measurement, for places where relationship matters more than geometry, for boundaries that exist in transition rather than line. And if I find such places, I will do what I did at Blackwood: measure what can be measured, observe what cannot be measured, and document both with honesty. The instruments remember their limits now. They are humbler tools, more truthful tools, because they know they cannot capture everything. Some things must remain unmeasured. Some distances are better left as mystery than forced into false precision. I am a surveyor, I measure land for living. But I am also now something else, a witness to what measurement cannot capture, a documenter of boundaries that exist in care rather than geometry. The stone sits on my desk, water smooth and patient. The instruments wait in their cases, calibrated and ready. And I am ready too, for precision where precision serves truth, for mystery where mystery is honest. Both matter, both are real. I measure, I observe, I document. And sometimes, when measurement fails, I simply acknowledge that some boundaries were never meant to be drawn.